Welcome to the D-Shift podcast, where we provide inspiration, motivation, and education to help you transition from the challenges of divorce to discover the freedom and ability to live life on your own terms. Are you ready? Let's get this shift started. Hello and welcome to another episode of the D-Shift podcast. And I am really excited to talk to John LeMieux. He is an expert in all things to deal with the financial and complications of going through the divorce process. So let me give you a brief introduction, and I'm going to make sure I get this right. John is the co-founder and principal of Anton LeMieux Financial Group. He is a leader in promoting collaborative divorce in Maine, and I know he was instrumental in actually getting collaborative divorce started up there. He is a certified financial planner and a certified divorce financial analyst, helping clients since 1993. So, John, welcome.
Well, thank you for having me. I guess I've been around a while.
Well, you know what? I was thinking, somebody asked me the other day when I started kind of working with people in divorce, and I had to say it was like 1991. So yeah, a few years on me. So John, tell me a little bit about what got you into the area of focusing in on the financial aspects of, particularly of divorce, which a lot of professionals steer away from because of the emotional side of the process.
Well, I think the genesis of it came when I took some coursework through the Gestalt Institute down on Cape Cod, and it was a 2-week course spread over 3 months, 2 in-person weeks down at their center on Cape Cod on intervening with couples, families, and small groups. And I did that because I was working with a lot of family-owned businesses at the time, and the intergenerational things that would happen. When Junior was ready to take over the business from Senior, but Senior wasn't ready to let the reins go, or Junior thought he was going to be the one to take over the business, but Missy had the MBA,
right?
And so how do you have this interaction with the family to help them kind of move the ball along? And I was the only non-therapist, non-psychologist, non-clinical therapist in the cohort that took this class, and it really just piqued my interest on how to work with families in particular. And shortly thereafter, I heard about the Certified Divorce Financial Analyst designation. And I'd been a CFP for probably a decade at that point, and had also gotten something called, I'd become a certified investment management analyst, which was basically math. But the CDFA caught my eye, and so I began to explore it. And as I looked at the coursework that was required, I saw a lot of attention being paid to the interpersonal, that not just the math of it. And so I went ahead and did the coursework and completed the case study and received that designation. And then I just set about trying to find work. Well, about the same time, collaborative divorce was just starting to hit its stride in Northern New England. There was a strong collaborative community, not just in the divorce world, but also in the business world in Massachusetts. And so they were reaching out and starting to do some training in New Hampshire and in Maine. And because of the background that I'd gotten from that original Gestalt work, which really, if you sum up Gestalt, and my apologies to all the psychologists out there, what they try to do is identify positives and then reinforce those positives as they work with individuals or with couples to deepen the conversation and kind of move things along. And I thought that was a very interesting way to perhaps approach divorce.
Sure.
And certainly collaborative divorce. And so I took the training. I took the initial training and then the advanced training on the collaborative divorce. And then some attorneys and I here in Maine set up the first work group. Actually, that's not true. We set up the second work group. This had been tried in Maine about a decade earlier, and it fizzled.
Right.
And it's very hard to get a purchase, because in the collaborative process, all the professional parties, agree that they won't work with the client if the collaborative process fails.
Right.
So an attorney is giving up their ability to take this to litigation. They'd have to find new counsel. And in my role, I actually give up the opportunity to work with the client, even if the process is successful.
Right.
Because my client is the process. It's not to get Mrs. Smith a couple $1 million so I can then manage her money.
Right.
Yeah. Matter of fact, my very first collaborative divorce was the reason they got divorced was the husband was being offered a large promotion within his multinational corporation. And the wife said, "I don't see you as it is. If you take the new job, I'm done." And he took the new job. And so the last thing I did was interview 3 investment firms in Chicago, which is where the wife was moving to, in order to make sure that she had good opportunities for having somebody manage her money. And it's she would have been a wonderful asset management client.
Right.
But that wasn't allowed under the rules, and it was actually pretty freeing, because all I had to do was take care of the process for the 2 of them, and then do what I could to make sure she landed on her feet on the other side.
Yeah, and collaborative divorce, I'm in Texas. Collaborative divorce there's a small group here, but again, you're fighting an uphill battle with, number one, the public perception that the only way you get what you need in divorce is if you duke it out and you beat the other person down. And the legal system is not set up. It's set up to be adversarial. It's not set up to be collaborative. But there's a lot of movement in Texas here. And it's such a positive thing. And I love the way you explained it, that it's very clean. Like, if anybody who's representing you as a financial expert, or as an attorney, or even in a mental health capacity or coaching capacity in the collaborative divorce, cannot work with you if you decide to go through to court. So it's very, very clean. And I don't know what the percentage is. Maybe you do, John. Do you have a rough guesstimate of how many couples that enter collaborative divorce actually complete their divorce through the process?
Boy, I don't know that answer writ large. I can tell you an anecdotal story that talks about the power of it. Another divorce that I worked on, a collaborative divorce, the quick fact was the man was a scholar, worked internationally. His wife had been a scholar, started to stay at home when they began to raise an adopted daughter, and the man had a relationship outside the marriage, and so the marriage was going to end. And we're working through the process, and it came to light, third of the way in, half the way in, that the man had given his girlfriend a large sum of money to buy a house in the United States. And the lawyers and I and the coach, we thought we were done. We didn't think there was any way it was going to survive this. But we were able to point out to the man what a stupid idea that was, and point out to his wife that, yes, that check was gone, but I'm the one who's looking at the finances, and that money was going to come from his part of the divorce settlement.
Right. So
you weren't going to be harmed. And we kept it on track. They were able to continue working together, and they pulled it off.
Yeah.
It was a really quite amazing when we were in the middle of it, and that news hit like a hammer. But they stayed, they worked, and the coach did a great job, and both attorneys did a wonderful job of making sure that their respective clients were going to be well protected. And then I was able to just move the numbers around so that, that money was gone, but it only went from his half of the ledger.
Right. So let's talk, and that's a wonderful story. And I don't know what the statistics are either, but I think I read somewhere that typically most divorce, 15% of everybody that files for divorce ends up going to court. If you go through the collaborative divorce process, I think it's less than 5% actually end up
Okay.
abandoning the collaborative process and actually going to litigation. So it costs a little more. I'm not going to lie, it costs a little more on the front end, but if you can save that litigation cost and that stress and the time and the public airing of the dirty laundry, boy, is that a positive for, especially if you have kids or if you have a professional reputation and you don't want it dragged through the mud. Don't go to court if you can avoid doing that. So can you talk a little bit about what you do as a financial consultant during a divorce, whether it's in the collaborative or outside of the collaborative? What is it that your role is, and how does that help people with the whole emotional, financial stress part of
Sure.
the process?
Well, the first thing I hope I do is that I help people, whether it's just one client or whether the divorce itself is a client. I want to make sure, I want to do everything I can that they feel heard, that I understand why they're sitting across the table from me. And if it's a couple, that means that both people feel heard, and that I do everything I can to be empathetic to how we find ourselves here, because nobody gets married with the idea that they're going to get divorced.
Right.
But yet 50% of us who get married end up going through divorce. And I also talk a lot about teasing a marriage apart, about because obviously there's the emotions that are involved, and those can at some point in the process, I guarantee you they're raw. If
Sure.
if if they're not, that well, I've just seen a couple where they just said, "Look, you know, I love you, but we're not. This is not going to work.
Yeah.
Let's figure it out." Uh, Most of them, hopefully, they get there, but most of them starts a little rougher than that. But there was a reason they got married, and so how do we tease apart this union, and how do we, in my role, how do we tease apart the financial side so that both sides can feel as secure as they can be given our fact set?
Right.
If the assets are $20,000 in the bank and a trailer, well, there's going to be a lot of insecurity because
Sure.
everybody's going to have to start pedaling again as soon as the divorce is done. You know, but on the other hand, if the assets are 20 or $30 million and three homes, the the change, the wrenching, the upheaval still can make people feel insecure.
Right.
And so how do we help them know this is going to be okay? So I think the first thing is really trying to understand the parties. And again, that's whether I'm working for uh, one side or the other. But if that doesn't happen, then you're just crunching numbers, and they can do that in Excel.
Yeah, I want to ask you about this because I see this a lot. I only work with women, and most of my clients are fairly high achieving women. So,
Mhm.
if anything, there's enough money to go around, but there's still that sense of I think through the divorce process, there's still a lot of unrealistic expectations about finances and about, well, I'm going to get this and I'm going to have this and this is going to become all of mine. And, depending on where you live, I'm in Texas, it's a community property state. It's kind of a
Mhm.
50-50 split. I mean, it's not exactly 50-50. Don't get me wrong.
Yep.
There's things
Yep.
you can own before, there's, inheritance you can get, there's all kinds of things. But I mean, how do you help people manage those kind of realistic things that, yeah, you might have to go back to work, or maybe we need to look at you retraining for a better job, if you want to
Mhm.
maintain this level of income. Do you work with clients on that as well?
Oh, certainly. And I think the big takeaway for most clients, I hope that when our work is done, is that they're going to be as secure as they can be, giving the facts.
Right.
And so to that end, one of the things that I introduced very early is the concept of fairness versus equitable. And the example I always give, if you and I were involved in a very detailed and hard-fought negotiation, and you went home on a Friday after we went at it hard on Friday, and you said, okay, what's John need? And you developed over the weekend a very fair proposal, and you presented it to me on Monday. Well, if you put a lot of time and effort into that fair proposal, by definition, my counter proposal is unfair.
Okay.
Right?
Yeah.
From your point of view, because
Right.
I mean, you've really, and so the idea of fair or unfair it's emotional. What I want to talk about is equitable, and equitable doesn't mean equal.
Right.
Doesn't necessarily look fair, but what I want to be able to do and what I want to be able to model for each client is what this looks like over time, using some conservative estimates, plugging in real numbers to the extent that we have them in terms of income or Social Security or spousal support or inheritances, and both premarital inheritances and perhaps a parent that has not passed away yet, but there's a high expectation, but really looking at real life numbers, so that we can address because the question is not, and even with the high achieving women that you've referenced, sometimes it's, I'm going to get mine because that's how I get my pound of flesh.
Right.
And you certainly understand that, in a marriage where there's been, somebody's gone outside the marriage or otherwise, been unfaithful to the process.
Broken trust or what?
Yes,
Yeah.
broken trust.
Yeah.
And that's a very normal.
Right.
And to say, you can't tell people just don't think like that.
Right.
Because that doesn't work. So, but that's I'm going to get this because.
Right.
And what I try to do is show them what they need. If your standard of living is $125,000 a year, and here's what we have for assets, here's what you have for income. Maybe there's spousal support, maybe there's transition support to allow somebody to go back and finish a degree. But here's an expectation over time, and we actually model it out over time,
Mm-hmm.
of where you'll be and where he'll be,
Right.
given our proposed splits, and then we can start to, once I have all the facts loaded into my software, well, now so I put some over here, this changes. I put some over there, that changes, and they can see that they're going to be okay.
Yeah.
Now, if they want to come after a pound of flesh, well, that's not going to happen very well in a collaborative divorce. But there are attorneys who will help them get it, or not.
Or we'll help them attempt to get it and actually end up costing more than you would have got in a settlement. Yeah. And that's not against attorneys. I mean, if clients are paying for it, that's what they want. Attorneys do what you want them to do within the bounds of the law and representation. So,
right.
So I think that's wonderful that you have that ability. And this is why I really encourage people, either, whether you're in collaborative process or not, talk to a certified divorce financial analyst who can run these numbers for you. Even something as simple as, when do you sell the house? Do you sell it as a couple or do you sell it as a single? Because there is a huge capital gains difference. If
you sell a house pursuant to a divorce, you still get to keep the spousal exemption.
Right.
So you still keep $500,000 before you in gain. So you may want to sell it afterwards. We may award it to one spouse to the other in our work, but then we'll take the post-tax number.
Right.
Because that's what's going into their if they have $1 million home and they're only going to have, I'm making this number up, 800 after tax. Well, it doesn't do any good to put $1 million in their column.
Right.
Right.
Exactly.
Right. But again, just addressing it, uh, real numbers as best we can, and then just modeling it forward. And but even more important than the math is letting them know that that somebody sees where they are,
Right.
and that you know, and this is true in my world, whether I'm in a collaborative divorce or not. You know, I have the client, and the client's best interest is all that matters.
Right.
And my business partner and I do a lot of financial planning and working with family-owned companies and things like that, in addition to my divorce work. But one rule we've always had is that when we do any planning or consulting work, and it certainly is true in the divorce world, we do the work, we finish the work, and I joke with the clients, you're going to get my bill, and God bless and good luck.
Right.
If you want us to do more, we can talk about it afterwards. But the planning is always the client.
Yeah.
And I think once people get that, they feel, they're not worried about being sold, that somebody gets them. Somebody's working, they're in their corner.
That's what I was going to say. That's what comes across loud and clear in your messages. You're really there for the client. You're not there, you're not there to, like you said, extract a measure of what do you call it, retribution against the other person, or revenge, or whatever you want to say. You're really there to manage the finances so that both parties come out at least being as comfortable as they can, given what's there to work with, is what I'm hearing.
Well, and if you think about a negotiation, if you're not thinking about what the other side needs, now whether that's based in fact or not,
right?
But if they perceive they need X, and you offer them X minus, well, they're not going to be happy unless you can show them how X minus works for them.
Right.
So whenever you're negotiating, you need to be aware of the other side.
Right.
Because there is no such thing as a one-sided negotiation unless somebody just holds all the power. And then in that case, it's not a negotiation.
Exactly. Right? And so, John, you've covered an incredible amount of stuff, and 20 minutes goes by so fast. I can never believe, especially when we have people like yourself that have so much experience and expertise. What do you think is the number one thing you want people listening to this to walk away with that knowledge stuck in their brain?
Well, I think the number one thing is that, you're going to be okay. It doesn't feel like it when you're in the middle of a divorce. It doesn't, emotionally you're going 6 ways from Sunday. Financially, you may or may not understand the financial, the moving parts, but you're going to come out the other side. And finding the right therapist, the right attorney, the right financial person, it is asking for help and leaning on those people and making sure they're there for you.
Right. Yeah.
I think that's the most important thing. It's just when you're overwhelmed and things are going crazy, that you're not the first person to go through this, and with the right people, you'll find your way and you're going to be all right.
That's great. That's such a positive message too. John, if people want to find out more about what you do or get in touch with you regarding collaborative divorce or support with their financial stuff during their divorce, what's the best way to do that?
Well, we do work in all 50 states. I've done divorce work in California and Washington, and I don't know if I've done one in Texas, Florida, all up here in the Northeast. So they could reach me at AntonLeMieux.com. Anton, my last name, LEMIEUX.com. It's our website. Send me an email through there. And if I can be helpful, even just pointing somebody in the right direction, I'm happy to do it.
Thank you, John. And I will make sure all that information gets in the show notes. So if you're busy driving or walking or whatever, don't worry, it'll be there. I'd like to thank, again, John, thank you for your expertise and insight, and especially for your really thorough discussion about what collaborative divorce is, because I don't know that we've addressed that, on the podcast before. So thank you for that. Thank you for being here. And I'd like to thank everybody for listening in to the D-Ship. And don't forget to tune in again next Tuesday. Thanks for listening and supporting the D-Shift podcast. If you would like to attend live trainings by our amazing guests and have a chance to ask questions and get answers from our experts, join the D-Shift crew. For more details and to sign up, head on over to www.divorcecoachforwomen and click on the podcast page.